Congratulations to Naim Qassem for becoming the new leader of Hezbollah. Let's hope we can count his tenure in minutes or hours. And that would be my hope. But in recent hours, we're seeing reports that Israel is about to wind down its operation in Lebanon. And that does have to just make you wonder, has the mission been accomplished? Have rockets stopped being fired on Israeli civilians? Has Hezbollah decided that they are no longer a terrorist organization? Maybe they are now going to fight intellectually for laissez-faire capitalism. I don't think that's the case, which again then makes you wonder, why is Israel um, really throwing away the great achievements of the war in Lebanon and ready to call it a day? Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm joined by Adam Mossoff. Adam, your thoughts on these reports that Israel, it's almost over in Lebanon.
Well, I certainly hope not. And I hope the reports turn out to be false reports, as many of the reports have been in the past year, every time the Biden-Harris administration has tried to ram down the throat of Israel a so-called ceasefire deal with Hamas. Um, so I'm hopeful that this is another example of that. Because this is clearly being driven again by the Biden-Harris administration, which has this, for lack of a better term, fetishizes ceasefires and non-violence as an end in itself. And it's just it's it because the mission hasn't been successful yet. They haven't achieved their goals. Hezbollah still exists in its military capacity. It's still firing rockets at Israel. It's still a terrorist army of Iran, um, and um, and it needs to be destroyed. It needs to be utterly wiped off the face of the planet in the same way that we wiped off the face of the planet the Nazi armies, and the SS, and and the Imperial Japan's armies in World War II that committed similar types of atrocities against Chinese and Americans that Hamas and others have committed against Israelis and Jews.
Yeah, and as Bonnie says in the chat, Bonnie says throwing away the lives of those who died. 4 Israeli soldiers died today. Actually, that I think that was in Gaza. But yeah, if there's talks of ceasefire in Gaza as well, and Israeli soldiers have died in Lebanon, and civilians have died from rocket attacks. And on the other hand, we've been hearing for a long time that when Israel and Hezbollah go to war, it's going to be very bad for Israel. Maybe over 10,000 civilians will die, and there's no way to deal with the amount and quality of the rockets and missiles that they have. And that hasn't been the case. And Israel has really harmed Hezbollah's abilities to do whatever they could have done previously. And but they haven't done that in perpetuity, So if Israel now retreats, Hezbollah will regroup, and that war will come at some point in the future. And that point is whatever point Hezbollah feels like they could do more damage than they did this time around. This time, Hamas, which is weaker than always was weaker than Hezbollah, did more damage in terms of killing Israelis, and this was because Hezbollah didn't get involved right away in the way that they were going to on October 7th of last year. They were planning a ground operation invasion, which they didn't go through with. But yeah, all those capabilities could be brought back over however long it takes them. So this is we've seen this both we've seen this in Gaza, we're seeing it in Lebanon, we see this with Iran with every round. Okay, you fired us, we'll fire a bit stronger each time at you, and now there's talk of another round of that. um And I agree with you. Biden is definitely holding Israel back. I think we probably disagree on the distribution of blame. I blame Netanyahu a bit more for not just doing what needs to be done, despite with whatever consequences it comes with from the U.S. But the election coming up in a week from today, how much is that actually playing into the decision making process in Israel and on the side of Israel's enemies?
Yeah, that's a great question, Razi. In the reason why we differ on kind of the distribution or the relative percentage of blame is because there has been a marked change in the Israeli approach to the war since early August, and where they became much more serious, much more willing to accept collateral damage and collateral losses of civilian life to take out targets, high value targets, decapitation strikes against both Hamas and Hezbollah, and and much more aggressive in their military strategies and tactics, including invading Lebanon. So, um, and so I would have agreed with you that Netanyahu was probably more likely to blame earlier, but I think that that October 7th was a wake-up call for them, and I think that and then following Netanyahu's visit to Israel or the United States in late July, where he met with Kamala Harris and he met with Donald Trump. And the reports that I heard, no one knows what was actually said in the meetings, but was that Netanyahu realized they had to get the job done before the election because if Harris wins, it's game over for Israel. Harris has made it very clear, both in her policies that she has supported in the Biden-Harris administration, because we all know Biden is not running things, as well as as well as in her statements as a candidate that. To put it lightly, she is not a fan of Israel or a supporter of Israel. And that's being very kind in how I'm framing how I normally just frame her remarks. So so I really do think that the Biden-Harris administration really had arm twisted Israel to prevent it from doing the type of attack on Iran that Israel really wanted to do. I've heard potentially that Israel is actually very low on munitions, given that it's been engaged in a very long war now for about a year, especially on the anti-rocket missiles, on its Iron Dome system and its Arrow system. And it was very noticeable that the U.S. anti-rocket system, the THAAD system, was deployed to Israel, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And one can connect the dots. Okay, we will provide you the military support you need, but you have to not attack the nuke facilities and the oil facilities in Iran. Which, by the way, I mean, Biden was explicitly saying that publicly. So we're not connecting any secret dots. These are actually explicit dots that we're connecting. So, I think the election is a make or break for Israel. I think candidate Harris has made it very clear in her remarks to the Nazi brown shirts that are rampaging through the streets of the United States right now and on American campuses that she agrees that that Israel is guilty of genocide, is guilty of causing humanitarian crisis, that Israel is to blame for even the execution of the hostages in August by Hamas, that Israel is to blame for the lack of a ceasefire with Hamas, and she has supported the arms embargoes already imposed, and the Biden-Harris administration has now explicitly threatened to impose a total arms embargo starting in November, shortly after the election. So everything it is this conflict with this attack on Western civilization, this attack on Israel as the sole representative of the Western civilization in the Middle East, as the only representative democracy in the entire country that respects the equal civil rights of its citizens, Arab and Jew alike, and Druze and Christian. It's everything. This is a make or break election for this conflict.
And I saw that was a pen flying by. I saw Michael Kaufman post today on LinkedIn that Bernie Sanders said that Harris's approach will be different, and by different he means more anti-Israel. I wonder, whenever because there's an election and there's 2.5 months until whoever gets elected gets into office. Those 2.5 months, stuff happens during those months. Especially when a different party gets in. So if, let's say, Trump wins, and then we have 2.5 months of Biden in office until Trump gets in. I mean, I remember stories from the past, things like when Bush won in 2000, the Clinton administration, they like took out the W of the
Yeah,
out of the
they vandalized
keyboards.
the White House. Yeah.
But that which is, by the way, bad enough in a private company. You would get fired for that, but it could be much worse in terms of policy specifically regarding Israel during those 2.5 months. Is there a cause for concern there?
Um, it's that's another really great question. And it's yes and no. So obviously, the Biden-Harris administration could do some significant damage to Israel in the 2.5 months of what we refer to as the lame duck session of our government, between the election and when the new Congress and the new administration is sworn in. Um, but I think I bet Israel has been planning for this. They've probably been stockpiling weapons and other things in preparation for a potential arms embargo, since there's nothing left to lose for the Biden-Harris administration at that point if they lose the election. And so I wouldn't be too surprised if there's backup plans in place in Israel for this. But the and ultimately, at the end of the day, 2 months is a relatively short period of time. I mean, Trump has made it very clear that he is 100% in support of Israel and whatever it wishes to do to defend itself and needs to do to defend itself against Iran and its terrorist proxy armies like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. And so I'm fairly confident that whatever damage they might do would be very minimal in the long run and would be quickly undone by the Trump administration coming in and providing the type of military support and aid that Israel needs to fight this war against an enemy of both of us, of both the United States and Israel.
Yeah, and would be great if the current administration recognized that it is an enemy of the United States as well, rather than have the kind of rhetoric that is identical. The Iranians are calling for ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza, which
Hmm.
you can't really know. I could probably read a statement you wouldn't know. Is it the Iranian spokesperson or is it an American spokesperson? Which
Yeah,
is a terrifying situation.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it's not just rhetoric. I mean, one of the reasons why Iran is able to fund and support Hamas and Hezbollah in the way it has been, especially in the past year, has been specifically because of the Biden administration. I mean, they have given the Iranian country billions of dollars, unfreezing accounts that were frozen back from the Islamic Revolution in 1979, as well as giving them humanitarian aid in millions and millions of dollars. And it's been pointed out to them, it's like, well, Iran can take that money and use it for military supplies and development. And the Secretary of State said, no, they promised to make it, use it only for humanitarian supplies. And then, it's pointed out, it's like, well, money is fungible. Even if they only did use those particular dollars to buy wheat, that means that frees up other dollars that they can use for military development and funding of terrorists. So I mean, the unleashing of Iran in the past 4 years is directly a byproduct of the active policies of the Biden-Harris administration in making that possible.
Well, luckily, some of our viewers spend their money much better than the Biden administration spends taxpayers' money.
Yes.
Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, Razi, here is how a ceasefire can come. Hezbollah surrenders unconditionally. Yes, I mean, unconditionally, but there have to be conditions to the unconditional. Like it has to be that the organization really doesn't exist anymore, certainly
Yeah.
as a military power.
Yeah.
Um, and PC also says Netanyahu has been so tame. which I agree with, but I also agree, as Adam said, things have changed, and I think things have changed. The timeline I put is early June is where I first saw kind of operations that are more bold than we've seen before, with the operation where four hostages were rescued with really seemingly, as far as we can tell, no concern for anybody who might, in Gaza, who might be a casualty on the way, which is the way you should do it. And by the way, some of the complaints after that operation were that Israel didn't notify Hamas that they were coming.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I know. It's like, it was, well, and it shows you the depth of the insanity of the not just general world opinion and the UN and the institutions, but people in the United States more broadly now about Israel and the situation where the constant drumbeat from our elites was Israel is to blame for this hostage rescue, for the deaths of hundreds of Hamas terrorists who are attacking them, and for not alerting Hamas that they were about to do this. Only Israel would be blamed for rescuing the hostages, and for having the audacity to do that. I mean, it's just yeah.
yeah, and Christian, thank you for the super chat. Christian says something along those lines. He says, uh, it's a quote from Yaron Brook. One soldier you lose because you want to avoid civilian casualties is a moral crime. Israel has lost many soldiers in Lebanon. I wonder how many could have been avoided. Yes, in Lebanon and in Gaza, many could have been avoided, and the price would have been more civilian deaths on the other side, which is a price that a country should be willing to pay. It's not your job to protect civilian lives on the enemy's side. It's your job to protect the lives of your citizens and of your soldiers. Yes, soldiers are more likely to die. They are fighting the war, but that doesn't mean you send them in when there isn't a need. And yeah, uh, much more aggressive aerial campaign before the ground operations could have probably saved many Israeli lives.
Yeah.
And of course, with what we have seen, um, we still see Israel condemned universally for killing civilians. So
Yes. Yes. It's accused of indiscriminate killing, even when it is as precise and as discriminate as possible. And we saw this in the pager boom operation, one of the most precise operations in human history, in all of military history, targeting like something like 1,500 Hezbollah operatives and leadership directly, and they were still accused of indiscriminate killing. Just 2 days ago, here in the United States, a radio interviewer or podcast interviewer was interviewing Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania and saying, well, a little child got killed when she was carrying the pager to her father when it went off. And he said, well, that's the fault of the father. He shouldn't have been a member of Hezbollah and brought that pager into his house. That is the type of moral clarity that we need, and that we have not had in this country from 99.9% of our current political leadership.
yeah, and you do have to wonder to what extent like this war will maybe help in that sense for some people, because for me, there's nothing clearer in terms of any political issues out there than this conflict. The Palestinians are a culture of savages. That's not anything genetic, or it's not that we know that people have left that society, but as a society, it is a society that is has one mission, which is to exterminate the Jews and get them out of that land. And anybody who's not clear on that is it's scary on the one hand to see that we have that on the West. On the other hand, hopefully the people who lean towards rationality will lean heavier with the help of the
Yeah.
counterbalance from the other side. Um, Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says she being Harris is upset that UNRWA is banned. Yeah, that's another thing. We've been talking on this channel about how policies are often shaped, and policies of countries around the world towards Israel are often shaped by the latest headline, and for better or worse. So UNRWA, when it got out what exactly UNRWA operatives are doing, a bunch of countries stopped funding them. Then Israel kills unintentionally some aid workers, and then UNRWA gets funding from other countries. So yeah, let's put it this way: Israel sometimes acts too slow. I wonder if UNRWA had been banned immediately back in January when we heard about teachers celebrating on October 7th, when we saw the details of UNRWA employees being involved in October 7th. Had it been banned and designated a terrorist organization right then, how would the world have responded? In the same way that we have to wonder if Israel had acted on October 8th of last year, probably the Biden administration would have found it more difficult to use the kind of anti-Israel rhetoric that they use now.
Possibly. I think they just would have found other excuses and reasons to attack Israel. I mean, because the evidence has been continuing. It wasn't just last January when they first released the evidence of the deep connections between UNRWA and Hamas. That UNRWA teachers were members of Hamas, participated on October 7th, and and as Israel has been killing Hamas terrorist soldiers and leaders, that they have been identifying them as being members of UNRWA, and including up to the killing of Sinwar. His bodyguard had an UNRWA ID card on him, identifying him as a teacher of UNRWA. So I mean, so like I said, it's like it wasn't just like one batch of evidence. I mean, so the hatred of Israel, this combination, which is a perfect combination of kind of hate, classic, the 2,000-year-old anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, nihilism, um, hatred of the West. Jews are paragons of kind of what does it mean to be successful. They've embraced all of the virtues and values of Western civilization in terms of successful living in this world and successful lives professionally and freedom and embrace of equal rights and of protection of people and embrace of limited government and things of these sorts. So it ends up being this kind of focal point, this of every hatred of everything that's good, and this is in the world, which then gets focused on Jews and on Israel. And so, yeah, even if UNRWA, you know, if it wasn't UNRWA, it would be something else. There's always some excuse, and when they don't have an explicit reason, they make up one, like there's a humanitarian crisis or there's a genocide or something of that sort, which is just pure propaganda. There's just no basis in fact whatsoever for any of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you, PC, for another super chat. PC asks, why did Lammy refund them? Disgraceful. That's David Lammy, the British
Yeah, the
Foreign
prime minister.
Secretary. And yes, why did Lammy is generally, I think, a question we'll be asking to insert whatever the last thing he did in the next 5 years. And disgraceful will probably be the conclusion. That's my best
I'm
answer.
sorry, yeah, not prime minister. Prime Minister Keir is the prime minister. But like, well, you could say, well, why are there basically Nazi brown shirts, rampaging through the streets of London? I mean, I tweeted just the other day that, Churchill would be rolling in his grave, that the country he defended against the Nazis, the country of John Locke and Lord Mansfield and Lord Acton and Adam Smith, has Nazi brown shirts rampaging through the streets of London and are literally harassing and physically attacking Jews and British subjects who are Jews. It's shameful.
Yeah, I saw a video last night of some girls in the tube, the London Underground, protesting and chanting something like "Zionists go back to Poland." And the irony of it, 'cause they were clearly not born, or at least their parents not born in the UK, And
Yeah.
it's very clear to people if, if a white person says to a black person, go back to Africa, it's not difficult to understand how evil that statement is. But when it's said to Jews, it's not happening in a vacuum, I guess, and there is some sort of justification for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we have the same problems here in the United States. With the vile nihilistic anti-Semites, pro-Hamas, pro-Iran, um, you know, uh, pro-theocratic totalitarian regimes. Of people who have emigrated to the United States who are largely, for instance, in Michigan, who don't, who openly praise just today just today at a rally for presidential candidate Jill Stein, who is the presidential candidate from the Green Party in the United States. The speaker was praising Nasrallah, and explicitly. It wasn't like, even hidden in code words. It was very explicit praise of Nasrallah. I mean, a anti-Semitic genocidal war crime, war crime advocate. I mean, it's shocking.
Yeah, although I think Jill Stein's criteria for praising somebody is have they murdered and oppressed enough people. That's
Yeah.
she's
Well, it wasn't her. It was a speaker at her rally. But that's the thing. Like,
yes, but she
like,
approved this message. So
yeah, well, I mean, it was a speaker at her rally, right? So, and yet at the same time, like, what's on the news? That's not being reported. That I learned about this because someone tweeted it who was there, who had a clip of the speaker. That's not on the news at all. What's on the news? On the news is Trump is Hitler. And oh my God, there was a really bad jokes being made, offensive jokes being made at the beginning of Trump's rally in New York City. Like, this is what's being talked about. Like, okay, well, in the grand scheme of things, you have a comedian who, by the way, is a comedian who does these types of jokes all the time. If anyone knows about him, does really offensive jokes about Puerto Ricans versus someone who's actually literally praising someone who explicitly has acted upon and is responsible for the slaughter of innocent people, including children. In the scale of things, which is worse?
So, when I announce things on a show, I one of my favorite things is to see the expression of the co-host or guest. Unfortunately, in this case, you know what I'm about to announce. So it's but I don't think much of our audience does. So a couple of hours from now, after the reality show and the Atlas Shrugged Book Club, on our Substack, there is a new um, new article gonna be that's gonna be published on our Substack titled "Anti-Trumpites for Trump." That article is by Leonard Peikoff, the first article by Peikoff in a long time. I don't know how long. Tomorrow, there will be an interview by James Valiant with Dr. Peikoff, also on the channel. And then every day from Thursday until Election Day, we will have a different video, members only video, of a different person asking Dr. Peikoff a question about the election or about his essay. So make sure you tune into that. You read the Substack article. You become a member so you can watch the other videos. Adam Mossoff is one of the people who asked one of the questions. Yeah, make sure you tune in for that. Adam, where can people find more from you?
So certainly I'm on my X account or Twitter account it's my at Adam Mossoff, one word. Um, and that's largely where I have a lot of presence on these issues today.
Yeah, and if you're gonna follow one person on X related to the war, it should be Adam. He does tweet about other things or post whatever it's called, but yeah, make sure you do that. And if you're gonna follow too, I'm Razi Ginzberg on X. The reality show starts in a couple of minutes. We will be talking about Mehdi Hassan. That should be fun. Thanks, Adam. Thanks everybody for watching.
Another vile, nihilistic and anti-Semite who's being this the sycophancy by CNN and Miss Phillips toward him is just abhorrent. Yeah.
And he plays the victim.
Yes.
Anything said against Mehdi Hassan is racist, Islamophobic, and
Yeah.
whatever
the
else you
the
can.
fact that after calling anyone who supports Trump a Nazi, and then the response to him is, well, how's your pager doing? That is accused of being a racist joke, but he's allowed to call people Nazis.
Well,
And,
the guy said, "I hope your pager doesn't go off." So he
yeah.
actually, wished him well, I would say.
Yes,
Anyway,
yes.
thanks, Adam, and we'll see you on in a couple of minutes on the reality show.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, Razi. Cheers.